my nickname. So after that, they called me Jerry. They gave me the name Jerry. I had a number. The very first meeting on that ship in the crew meetings, I had a number. They said we need to give him a name,
right?
And they named me Garoosted.
Garoosted.
And then after that, Americans on the ship called me that. Well, his name's Jerry. And so I went by Jerry.
For those of you that don't know, Ceres is in the asteroid belt, and that's in between Mars and Jupiter, correct?
Just before it. Just in between Mars and closer to the asteroid belt, but in between Mars and the asteroid belt, yeah.
Right.
And it's about 587 miles diameter. It's a small place.
Okay.
They had artificial gravity. On Mars, they had artificial gravity. They have flooring, special flooring that creates the gravity. They have artificial gravity plating that goes on in the ships and in the bases there. So the entire, I'm talking about giant city-sized towns that are in caverns, giant caverns down there that all have fake artificial gravity. It was a thing. It was mind-blowing to think about. I remember being in big areas and looking out over through a city, you know, which were not tall buildings, like 2 or 3 story buildings built in a giant cavern, but just thinking to myself, this is all artificial gravity.
Yeah.
And they could manipulate it. They would turn it down. They didn't make anti-gravity. All they had to do was turn down the artificial gravity, and there were places that had no gravity, or, you know, microgravity.
And was there an atmosphere on Ceres? Was there a sky?
No, not on the outside. Everything was underground. 100%. All the settlement is underground. A lot of the German-built places, they had painted fake skies. Blue skies with clouds they had painted. It was cheesy. They had lights on there, and then they were just starting to get moving digital skies in some of the caverns right before my time was up. I went, you know, the last few months I was there, I remember going, they said, you got to go check it out, man. It's our new sky. They're all going to get it soon. Pretty soon everywhere was going to have a digital sky. And I thought it was cheesy, you know, because there were people there, the girls that were there didn't really remember the sky. They did a 20 and back, and they had no memory of where they came from, and their entire 20 and back, they never had sky.
Were these the sex workers that you're referring to? Yeah.
Yes, the girls that were taken, they were sex slaves that were in a brothel in the red light. There was a red light district, and I hung out with them quite a bit. You know, not that I was a big spender, but because they let me stay there, and, you know, I drank lemon water and I could spend time there.
Right.
And I didn't like going to other place. Like going into town, it was embarrassing to be a slave.
And so you got the privilege to sit in that club or that brothel because the owner became privy to the experience that you had with the valve.
I got beat up. I got beat up outside of it. The very first time I got money. They gave me a little bit of money, and I could afford a train pass, and I got to explore. The condition was I was a slave, but I had a collar on, and the condition was that I'd report to work the next morning. Right. They didn't care what I did or how late I was out. They didn't care. They said as soon as you screw up your job, you'll lose the right to you'll lose your freedom. You know, as long as you show up to work in the morning and do your job right, you can go anywhere you want. You can do as you please. That was the deal. I was given that kind of freedom, and I was out and the one guy must have been joke set me up for a joke. He said, "You go to the red light district." I didn't even know what that was. I didn't even know what it was. He said, "Make sure you go to the red light district on your first trip out." You know, one of the officers in the mission briefing room. Yeah. He said, "Make sure you go check out the red light district." So I did. You know, I went and got a sandwich. I remember it was a lot of money for me. And I had just enough money to ride out there and then enough to get a pass to go back. I didn't get the whole day pass. I was buying them one at a time, the train ride. It was like a subway system.
Right.
And when I got to the red light district, I got beat up and robbed for the rest of my money. And one of the girls, they were ETs that were lost and were broke too. And so they said, "What do you?" They were in uniform. Everybody else was a civilian, was around me, and I was in a uniform. And then they were in a uniform, so I assumed they would be helpful to me. So I went up to them. They said, "What do you?" And they immediately got abrasive with me because I had a slave collar. Slave, don't talk to us. What are you doing talking to us? And, you know, telepathic. Yeah. They said, "What? You don't even belong out here. Do you have money?" And I said, "Sure, I got money right here. I can go. Can you tell me where the train is?" And then crack. They just beat me up. They beat me up well. I was bloody. Black-eyed and bloody. And I was just laying there crying because I thought I wasn't going to make it back. I thought, now I don't have any money. I don't know where the train is. And I've got to be back in the morning. They're gonna kill me. You know, I'm going to be in trouble. And one of the girls escorted a guy out, which the girls never come out of the club. And one of the girls escorted a guy out for some oddball reason and saw me and ran over and said, "Honey, what's wrong?" And she took me in and introduced me. And the club, the manager of all the businesses was like a 9-foot tall humanoid with the elongated skull with really scary. They came from somewhere else, but they had agreements. They ran all the businesses.
Right.
They ran literally every business.
Okay.
Huh?
These big 9-foot humanoid beings ran basically the businesses on Ceres.
Yes.
Okay.
And then they didn't like the gravity. They had lighter gravity, so he stayed put in his same area. He had like a cubicle that he could see everywhere in the club. And I guess there was one table that he couldn't see, and a girl had been assaulted there. And so she took me in there. He asked for help, and then they eventually called the police. And when the police got there, they saw my insignia on my shoulder, which is a couple squares.
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh, he goes to that one, to the hangar."
Yeah.
And he loaned me the money to go back. And he's like, "We're never going to get it." It was only a few dollars.
Yeah.
To me, it was a lot of money. I was not familiar with money at that point in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I woke up, I had no memory of my life before. When they took me and I went into my 20 and back life, I had no memory of my mom, dad, or America. I had no memories.
So they wiped them.
I woke up with these. But anyhow, so they sent me back, and I did go back and pay him the next week, and he let me stay in that table. What it was a girl had been assaulted. There was one table he couldn't see. And so he said I could stay there. I could come there for free and sit in that table as long as when the club filled up, I had to leave, and if I didn't bother anybody. He said, "You could come here and spend time," because I really didn't have anything to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a great arrangement for me, too. I went there, and I got to see girls.
Yeah. And this is the big thing, is that, so the brothel was for patrons that were both human and humanoid, ET, alien beings. And this is a thing that maybe a lot of people don't know, that, with some ET races, they're having sex.
ETs could come and pay to have sex with Earth girls, taken from Earth against their will, and blank slated and put through a 20 and back, and then put back. And they were sex slaves, yes, absolutely. And there were many different species. Most of them were like humanoid with, like a few small 7-foot tall race there. They had long hair, and they worked there. They were like a technical. They were worked on all the ship repair and all that. They were like tech people, but they were like 7 feet tall, and they had an elongated skull, but they had long straight hair that went down, all of them, and different colors. They always had different colors. I don't know if they did it on purpose or what, but they had black hair and blonde hair. But they were a tall race, not quite as big as the manager race that was there.
Yeah.
I'm sure if I heard the name again, I'd remember it, but I don't remember the name of what they were called.
Yeah, yeah.
They're kind of gray type humanoids that came in and out. There were reptiles that came in and out of there. And the girls, I don't know. There were, man, you're getting into some
Good
stuff that's hard to, you got to build up to this stuff to tell people. But there were times when, so I eventually had a relationship with one of the girls there, which I was poor, so it's not like we were going out dating, but we loved each other. I was madly in love with her. She was in love with me. We loved each other. It was amazing. But there were times when, and she would tell me everything. We talked about everything. We shared everything with each other. When she would go back and have sex, and she'd come back and tell me how it went. She would tell me stuff. There were German officers that came. She had news that she would tell me about what was going on that I didn't know, and I would tell her. She always wanted to hear about where I went. Did you see the sky? Did you see it? She always wanted to know where I went. I remember there were plenty of times. A lot of stuff I remember is because I was excited to go back and tell her. And so I still remember a lot of that stuff. And I remember it quite well. But there were times when she would go back and be with somebody that was telepathic, and she didn't want to tell me anything about it. I was very jealous about it. Because there were telepathic encounters that were less sexual, more mental, that were far more enjoyable to them than actually having sex. Yeah, there were ETs, and there were girls that were hurt by it. There were girls that went crazy, that went insane, and had to be taken away. There was no cure for that. Like you could get, with the technology and the SSPs, you could get your arm cut off and get a new arm. But there were mental conditions that arose that they couldn't fix. They couldn't fix. And there was a gray race that had uninterchangeable genitals, which I don't know how that worked out. But basically, they didn't have genitals like us, but they had such a strong telepathic bond. They would come and pay for the girls to
hang out with mentally.
Oral sex, whatever. And the girls would go. So the girls, it was expensive for them because there was a great chance that the girl would be damaged mentally from it. And so that's possible. So that's scary to think about.
As in, are they benevolent or malevolent, or is it because the experience was so deep that when they left, they couldn't forget thinking about them, or?
You know what? I'll tell you what. This is a big subject when you say about benevolent or malevolent. They're people.
Right.
The United States is not, because I live in the United States of America, doesn't mean I'm benevolent or malevolent.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'd give you a hug or a punch in the face depending on how we behave with each other. And the ETs are no different.
Yeah.
They are no different. There are races that their interest as a nation, as a species, their interest is kicking our ass. You know what I mean? Like being mean to us.
Right.
Because it's in their, it's not because they're bad people. It's because that's their interest. They're like a nation. Like one nation doesn't get along with another nation. So you can meet a race that's supposedly malevolent and meet a great guy from there. They're people. They're just people. Wow. And then you're talking on a macro scale, like all the countries of the world, how they get along. You know, are the people. Remember when we were kids? Russia was evil. You know, it was like there was going to be war with Russia. Russians weren't evil. No. They weren't bad people.
Yeah.
So that was my take on it. Everybody, I kind of gave everybody a fair shake. There were races that were dangerous. You would think of them as malevolent, but it wasn't because they're evil.
No.
It was because that they just were raised in that culture, and their race's interests are not in line with ours.
Okay.
And a lot of them look down on us. They look down on us.
So you feel, from your experience, there's a real hierarchical system out in space, I guess I could say, not just in the solar system, but actually in space. There is a hierarchical system in the galaxy. So you would say, would you say that there is some kind of hierarchical system in space?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the Germans were always, the Germans were pretty cocky. They were pretty arrogant in the fact that they thought they were the best of the best of people. And they were more advanced. Everybody bragged about how we are more advanced than anybody else. We're the first ones out here, and they were arrogant. I mean, straight up. But they were trying to get on the coattails of more advanced ones. And I remember there was a drop we dropped cargo not often, but a few times in the Catarina Mountains, in an underground place. It was an inner Earth entrance in the Catarina Mountains. There was an inner Earth race that was super advanced, and the Germans looked up to, and they really envied them. And we would do business with them. And what happened was, I remember the drop. It was a flat stone ledge that the ship would fit on, and we would drop cargo, and there was a cliff, and their ship would pull up to the cliff and get the cargo.
Okay.
And when you looked up, you could see sunlight from way in the distance, way up like a tunnel. You could see sun. But it was kind of off, like the ship was here and the sunlight there was a wall and you could see sunlight over here coming down. It was dark and it was a big cavern. And then there was a big, huge area, football fields, giant of slab, and their ship would pull up, not over it, but on the edge of it. And we had a zero G, like a vortex loader that made a vortex above. So I have something to show you. I don't have anything. I can show you. Here's a big vortex of it and lift it up. And that's how we put cargo. Cargo would be sitting, and it had whatever it did. I don't know. It was invisible, but it would make a vortex, and it had a laser light, a very bright laser light that would shine on it, so that you knew to stand back.
Yeah.
The light didn't do the thing. The light was a warning that there was a vortex in the area, and you could get hurt. from it, and it would lift up and then take it in. And once you got it to the point where it lifted, the computer would put it in and set it in a designated area in the cargo bay. So all I know is it was a vortex, and
Yeah.
it was and then the light on it was a warning thing.
Right.
And it was about, the ship was hard capped. The ship could not go lower than 10 meters, which is about 30 feet. So we were always looking down on it, and we had like there was a stair thing that went down, and we had cargo nets, and we had ladders that would go down. I think there was a lift that would go down, but we had to load everything up with that loader that would come into the cargo bay. And then if that failed, if we were in some, I think it was bad weather. If we were in a sandstorm or like a mega snowstorm or something, it didn't work as good, and it would lose its loading. There was some condition and it wouldn't work. I think it was like a sandstorm. So we had cranes. We had backup cable cranes that would fold out and drop cables down and load cargo as well. But we never used them.
So what was it about this race that the Germans wanted to be on the tails of? What is it about? What was it that they
were just very advanced. The Germans were all about getting more technology.
Did you see who they were? What did they look like?
Yeah, you know what? I interacted with one that's hard for me to remember. It's one of those things. It's hard for me to remember. They were taller, and he had long hair.
Looked humanoid?
And human. They looked like a human.
Wow.
A white guy. And telepathic interaction. There was just one time that I think we had to ask him how many he wanted or what was the total load of what he wanted. We had something. I don't know. They never told me what was in the box.
Yeah.
Most of the time, they never told me what was in the box. So we had cargo for him, and my question to him was, how many do you want us to unload?
Okay.
And, where do you want it? Over there. And he said, make a pile over there twice the size of what you got. That's all he said to me.
That's all.
Something like that. Like, see that pile? Make 2 of them.
Could you feel anything from him? Like any kind of empathetic energy? Like, could you tell?
Well, no. To me, he'd been talked up. The Germans, my captain and my officers that I worked with, talked these guys up. They looked up to them. So to me, he was rock star-ish. It was like I met a rock star.
Yeah.
And we talked like, he spoke to me, like the guys in the cargo bay were like, I talked to him. The other guy was like, no, talk to me way more. Like it was like that kind of experience. But I don't have a lot of, it's not a very clear memory.
Yeah.
It's still a vague memory.